So hello, my name is Yvonne Livingston from Ask a Black Psychologist. And today I have a very special guest, a young man that I met in college. And this is going to be so exciting for me. This is our future Senator, Marvin Slaughter. He's going into political office. I hope to one day become president of the United States of America, because that's how I feel about him today. It was I can't even say how we even met. I think we were just going to some political conversations, and we were both in the honors college, and we would sit down and have these talks. And I didn't really ask too many questions of, the political people that showed up, but Marvin Slaughter did. And I listened to his responses and I was like, man, that's some great leadership right there. And it's in the Gen Z. So I was completely in awe of this young man. And if nothing else, I can thank UIC for all the great people that I connected with. And I'm sure Marvin agrees that this tight-knit UIC community that we were a part of, is gonna be our ground roots here in Chicago. So thank you so much for being able to step into some great shoes. Our ancestors are very proud of you. I have no doubt about it. So I'm gonna be quiet and then let Marvin tell us what he's doing right now, because he really is doing some great work in our community. I'm going to be a part of it, and hopefully you'll join me, because this is some great work he's getting ready to do. Marvin, take it away.
Thank you, Yvonne. I appreciate, you opening your platform up to me and, always being there, being extremely supportive and, honestly, just having my back. I really appreciate that. As a younger politico, it's really important to make sure that we, kind of uplift the youth, make sure that they feel that that support, because, we can do great things. As of now, I am currently the acting interim director for the African American Leadership and Policy Institute. Our institute is attempting to kind of revolutionize the way that we produce policy in the African American community, really taking a lot of our knowledge and the wisdom that is already inherent in the African American community and bringing that, to bear with some of the academic literature that we see, day to day. Our organization is made up of policy practitioners, is made up of PhDs, people who are academics, published, made up of young practitioners as well, and really just trying to get community involvement going in the idea of creating a Black agenda that has policy tangibles, things that we can grasp, not just the consistent over-promising and under-delivering that has been prominent in the African American community for the better part of the last 40 or 50 years. So
I'm a witness.
That's it, and it's unfortunately, we like turkeys on Thanksgiving and we appreciate the toy drives on Christmas, but that's just not enough in attempting to rectify some of the intergenerational trauma that has been inflicted on Black Americans by the federal government, by state governments, by local governments. So, we're just trying to make sure that we can hold people accountable, and not only hold them accountable, because before we can hold them accountable, we have to give them something to be accountable to. We need to present the people who are attempting to go into office with platforms, with agendas that is from the community, that comes out of the wisdom of the community, in tandem with the data, and make sure that they understand well enough what those promises are, the expectations that we have of them, so that we have that equal yoking. The thing about being equally yoked is, hey,
come on now.
I have my expectations. You understand those expectations, you attempt to deliver on those expectations. And if you can't deliver on those expectations, I might have to go with the person who can. That's not red or blue.
Mm-hmm.
That's not Democrat or Republican. That's pro-Black.
Non-bipartisan.
That's it. That's it. I mean, it's not a partisan thing whatsoever. This isn't party politics. This is survival for us. And unfortunately, we are currently in a situation where, both the Democrats and the Republicans believe that they can play identity politics, and they believe that Black people will be political mules, that we'll carry them over the finish line for some butter biscuits and a cookie. Unfortunately, I'm not of that belief. And I believe that, you know, a lot of people in the African-American community are waking up to the rules. We catching on to the game. And I say better late than never. You know, I mean, studies have said that we're approaching, you know, zero median wealth by, what is it, 2052? That might have been accelerated by COVID.
Right.
And
come on now.
If we don't get it together now, we might not have, you know, wealth is power, especially here in America. A wealthless people is a powerless people. And, you know, people always are like, hey, the Republicans are going to put you back in chains. And I say that the political system, period, is going to put us in chains, just in a different way.
So I'm glad that you kind of segue to the word wealth, because that was part of my conversation today. One of the things that took me back while I was in college and sitting in my Black Studies classes was how the Black community survived. There were maroon towns, there were skills that were passed down. They taught each other. And so as I, you know, thought about the word wealth today, God said to me, Yvonne, start bartering and trading again. And so when you look at that type of mentality and you ask yourself, what do I have to offer? Many of us, we have a lot of tangible skills that we can use from one another and kind of cut down on the whole capitalism thing, because this is how I see how to, you know, give it a hit, a real strong hit, right? Because the Black community during this pandemic, absolutely, we all had to band together. You know, my children lost their jobs, you know, some of them had to come back home. And so we made it work. And I was away in Texas, helping to take care of my sister who had stage 4 cancer. So, you know, it was very fluid and it flowed, right? Because we made it work. We had to. This was our survival. And so now that we're coming back on top, because that's exactly what's getting ready to happen. I look at me, because I say I'm free. You know, a lot of people don't understand what that means. That simply means that I have a skill that God told me to use. The skill that I have, I went away to learn psychology so I can help my community. In what capacity, you know, was I going to do it? I didn't know. But now I'm getting ready to the new job that started today, and got to watch a bunch of videos. It's at the Urban Youth Trauma Center, where they have families who experience, you know, children. And I told her I wanted to, you know, talk to children and the parents and caregivers, because it's a unit. You can't treat the child and then send the child back home to the problem. You know, exactly. It's a network, right? And so I talked myself into a job, because that's what I told her I wanted to do. And she believes what I say, because she also knows that in our communities, it's a unit, right? And then, you know, the church is the focal point. And I'm really glad that, you know, that's how we're going to work, because I really do want to make a safe space for our community to come and talk to us. Our children are in danger, you know, from themselves and from the people that take care of them. And so I signed up to be part of the Family Network for your group. We're gonna have to think of a name because it's long, and you know, I'm a little older, so I can't think of the whole thing. But I joined for that very reason, and I went in that field because that's the work I'm getting ready to do, and they're gonna pay me, you know, because they have to. I work free for the community, but not for corporations.
No.
You know, y'all gotta pay me.
That's it. I mean, you know,
because my ancestors work for free already. We're not about to do this again. So
and let's add a caveat to that. They didn't work for free. We still expecting payment. For anybody who's watching this, you know, who's going to watch this, they didn't work for free. It's just payment has been deferred, but we coming for the check.
A dream deferred, right? That's the other thing Jabir told me about. You know, we talked about that class, right? When they bought their own land, you know, they were living their own thing, right? And they came and destroyed it. Why? Because they were jealous.
Yeah. And what they didn't destroy, they just stole.
Exactly.
You know, I do, you know, I'm a reparations researcher as well, working with Dr. Sandy Darity out of Duke. And, you know, we have an upcoming publication. And, you know, I've delved into, you know, some archives and some, you know, property deed records, and the stories of how many towns were just like stolen from Black Americans. One example comes to my mind, Kobe, Florida. All over the Black man trying to vote. And white people said, no, you're not gonna vote. And he came back with his shotgun. And he said, I'm voting. I'm voting. And if you try to stop me, you could take that up with Jesus. But I'm going to exercise my right.
Yes.
And a gunfight ensued. He shot a few people, and they called in the white cavalry, burning and pillaging the town of Ocoee, Florida, and basically gave the Black people their ultimatum, like, hey, either y'all sell this property to us for under market value, or we just gonna end up killing you all. So what ended up happening is, they had all the prime real estate in Ocoee, Florida. They owned the town center. They owned the outside surrounding prime farmland. They owned it all.
Wow.
Many affluential Black Americans in that particular town in 1920. And what you saw was between 1920 and 1930, the population went from, if I'm not mistaken, approximately 200 to like 10 in that 10 years. So, you look at that, and that's one of like 110 different examples of that type of like ethnic cleansing and genocide of Black Americans. And it's not something that's taught in history books. People love to bring up Tulsa, but if people said, hey, it was another 109 events that was just like Tulsa, but maybe even worse, people don't talk about that.
I didn't know that. And I think I had seen something like that where they talked about all of the massacres. There was a picture of it. And then I actually have a book that I haven't started reading yet, but I think that book talks about it. And so when we think about the trauma of those events, and especially if people don't know about it, it means that the remaining people decided to flee for their life and not talk about it. And so when you think about that and intergenerational trauma, now they got a new word for it. It's called epigenetics, where they found out that trauma travels through the bloodline. And so it's like the science is proving, the Black experience, right? So what God told me to tell people is to testify, tell your story, what you know about your life, your history, because we need proof. And the proof is you got to speak.
Yeah.
Because some
I
of this.
would even say something else. I mean, it's not even necessarily that the science is proving our experience. Our experience is the science. And I hate to say it,
that too.
And I tell people, especially in academia all the time, you take the lived experience of Black Americans, put some fancy vernacular on it,
Yep.
And then publish it and say that it's some type of new research when this is stuff that, uncles and aunties be talking about at the cookout all the time. This is nothing new to me.
Exactly. So that's what Jabir said to me, and why it was important for him to speak to me that way. Professor Jahari Jabir from the UIC Black Studies Department, excellent educator, told me to take my experiences with me on this journey so that I wouldn't lose me. Because, when you're going through, they teach you all the vernacular, all the words you're supposed to know. And on my way to quitting, because I went and sat in my professor's office, and she was a psychologist. And she said to me, Yvonne, you're well beyond what I'm teaching. She said, you understand the complexities of psychology. You just don't know the language. She said, that's all I'm trying to teach you are the terms, the words. She said, because how you process, she said, yeah, you're already thinking on the master's level. And so it made me feel good, right? And I stayed, got an A out of her class. And, now we can say the rest is history, but I still got to finish that Spanish class.
And that's a whole nother.
Man.
But, taking that point, I tell that to young people that I talk to all the time. Sometimes I go back to my old high school and I have conversations with, the young Black students there, and like, this is difficult. This is hard. I don't like this subject. And I'm like, listen, your ancestors created these subjects. Like, it's already innate in you. Don't let the terminology that other people came up to try to make it difficult for you actually hinder you from doing something that you already naturally are good at.
Like math.
Exactly like math. It's crazy because, you talk to people who in the community, people who might, be in the Black market selling certain things, and you're like, bro, you're great at accounting already. Like,
man,
you are a mathematician in and of yourself. Don't let nobody tell you that you less than because you are in the black market and not in what people call the legal market. When hey, you got the skills. If you wanted to transition, it's not as difficult. As far as like the skill transition, it's not difficult. It's not going to be difficult for you. Now, achieving that capital, getting that startup capital, that's different, and that's where they start playing them games. They use words and they use capital as the ways to prevent you from living out the things that are already innate to you.
Because that's how I thought about. That's how I started thinking about college. Once I got to the end of my courses, I was like, so they really making us pay for an education that's already in me. I just learned some new words. The only thing, especially for psychology, that's how I feel about it. Because really what I've seen in my experience, Black people need access and resources to make their lives look, smooth. So you're not stressed about what you're going to eat, where you're going to live, your health care, all of those things are tied to your mental well-being. And so if any of those things are threatened, so not only are you struggling physically, you're also struggling mentally. So you get so it's like a double-edged sword, right? It's what was it saying? You gotta laugh to keep from crying. Why we have so many comedians to come out of our community, because we have to laugh about the things that we've been through. And so, and how we tell it, we telling our trauma. And, because I started doing that myself here in my house, because of the parent that I was, before my transition. I really did have to allow myself to joke and allow my children to joke about it so we can talk about it and get it out in the open, because their childhood trauma is showing up for me right now, because, they'll say things like, oh, I wish you was like this, when I was little, and that's a valid thing, right? I didn't know how to process all my emotions, because that has to be taught. You have to teach children how to regulate their emotions. And when you don't, and you just tell them to go sit down, be quiet, children should be seen and not heard, those things, they never learn how to develop their voice.
Yeah.
So, it really is a hard subject to talk about, especially in our community. But I started this discussion in my own house, and why I can do it with anybody. I don't care, because I speak the truth.
And, I'm the same way. I look at it this way, like, a lot of what we learned was learned in survival mode.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, survival mode is not optimized for this type of society that we currently live in, right? So even if you want to talk about, let's bring it to theology. Let's talk about just the church. People are taught a broken religion every day. We're taught the traditions of the church, but we're not taught relationship with Christ. And people they love to talk about, hey, I'm in relationship with Christ. I'm in relationship with Christ. I'm in relationship with Christ. But unfortunately, their faith expression doesn't line up with their faith response, doesn't line up with their faith movement. You learn to imitate what looking like a Christian looks like, living like a Christian looks like, but you're not actually responding or moving in accordance to how God has called you.
And why I said, when I had that revelation, I just posted a story not too long ago about what happened when my children and I went to go take a family picture. The big fight at Chicago Ridge, and the police officers showing up with assault rifles scared the hell out of me, because I had never seen such weapons up close. A gun, yeah, but an assault rifle to show up to a mall full of children, that's scary. And so I really did choose in that moment to stand between my children and the other ones, because I said, if that police officer is going to shoot, he's going to take me first, and I was no threat to you. And that's the moment that God called me, because I stepped into something, right. And so when I started crying about, some other stuff, and that's a different conversation I'll start for later, I made a deal with God. And, of course I lost, but, it's like in that moment, you think that, you're like, well, dang, I really want to do this. But it's been the greatest journey of my life to work for children. And I started right here in my house. And so when I understood, what that meant, I mean, now I can work for you. I can work for all the ones I met at UIC. That's why I say, I didn't want y'all to call me mama while I was there, because I'd have been in people's office like, what you doing over here? And why they can't hire this? It would have escalated to that level. Why? Because this is my child. Marvin called me mama, or Deborah called me mama, or I can't even think of his name, but we know him. All
Justin.
of them. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Ken. So all of these folks that I met, while I was there, and the conversations that we were having, it was really about life, and trying to navigate, this space. What was this going to look like after college? Looking at having children. We discussed everything, and so it was like, now that we've had these conversations, what does this look like for you? Right. And for many, it looked very bleak.
And that's the unfortunate reality that, I talk to people 24/7, 7 days a week, and we always have conversations about, well, what is it? What exactly is going wrong in the Black community? What is it? What is it? Like, it's not just one thing. It's like, it's the epitome of all the things. All is working together, and it's coming together in a way that is terrible for our communities, right? I mean, you have the intergenerational trauma that's being transferred, where, terrible relationships from generation to generation. Parents and children are fighting. Parents and grandparents were fighting. Children are trying to charter new ways to have healthy relationships, and that is, violating some of the boundaries of the parents. People trying to have those types of conversations to say, hey, listen, when I was a kid, you did some things that hurt me, and, I've had traumatic, effects on my life. And trying to take that to your parent in a way in which they can receive it and not just get immediately defensive about it. That's one issue. Then you start talking about the intergenerational transfer of wealth and the lack of that intergenerational transfer of wealth, and how that, impacts things like being able to go to college, get a degree, come out, get a decent job, and earn wages that allow you to raise a family without having to worry about student loan debt. I'll make the argument all the time. People say, I think there was a study that just came out, and it was like, if they forgave all student loans, it would increase Black wealth by 40%. And I was like, oh, that's great. But the part that they're not telling you is, how much is it going to increase white wealth by? Because if it increases Black wealth by 40%, but increases white wealth by 80 or 90%, you just actually widened the racial wealth gap. You didn't do anything to solve it whatsoever. I made the argument that, okay, let's talk about the Black experience, right? If I forgive all student loan debt, I still got a mortgage. I still got, healthcare that I got to worry about. I still got, if my parents or my grandparents passed away, they left me a house that generally is dilapidated. You have to put money in it to get money out of it. You're left with so many bills as a result of the Black American experience, that even if you forgive student loan debts, all it does is free you up to pay your other bills off, or default on other bills instead of defaulting on your student loans. I mean, it's a cycle. You have to really pay attention to how they frame and how they term things, because that's the language barrier is what gets us. Even when you look at things like Prop 19 in California, where the guy was like, let's get rid of affirmative action because do you believe everybody should be equal? And like, yeah, I believe everybody should be equal, but I also believe in equity. Unfortunately, the only way to get to equality is through equity. Unless if I account for the historical wrongs to help get people on equal footing, there's no such thing as equality. But Prop 19 passed because everybody believes that we should be equal. And it's the truth. I believe that we should. But unfortunately, historically, that hasn't been the reality. And we need to make sure that we give more to those marginalized communities, because those are the ones who were historically kept out of different markets. They were the ones who were historically pushed down and left out, right? So if you're going to say, hey, we need equality, and you're not trying to address the past historical traumas and the past historical context of how we got to the situation that we're in right now, I call bullshit.
Hey. And that's real right there. That is so real, because that was one of the things that I looked at when I went back to college. When you start taking a political, and let me just be clear, my Black studies classes, we talked about everything: church, politics, psychology, sociology, anthropology, like all of those fields were in there, because we had Black scholars in all of those fields. And so they looked at the Black experience differently. And so when I was, sitting there listening and learning, I began to think about my life, my whole, I went back to 1973. And then once I got there and saw what was going on, I said, well, wait, what happened in my mother's life? And so I went back to 1957. And so when you look, and I'm like, well, wait, not a lot changed. So I said, well, maybe something changed from my grandmother. So I went back to 1939, right? And so when you like all of these events happened, she was born like right after the Great Depression. Well, she was still feeling those effects. And what effect was that for Black people, during that time period? Because then I went back to 1916. And so when you start traveling back and you start looking at your family history, it really begins to, open up. And so as that, so my great grandmother was born 1916, just 54 years after slavery had been abolished. So you naturally assume, right, that her parents were enslaved. You know what I'm saying? So when you look at it that way, and you really begin to transform that information to say all of those things affected your life. Because you can't say that it didn't. These people raised you. They were born in it. They experienced America, because life didn't happen in a vacuum.
It didn't.
You know what I'm saying? So it was my awakening, sitting in that classroom and then beginning to understand my mother's trauma, my grandmother's trauma, my great grandmother's trauma, and forgave it all. I forgave it all. Like I let go of all of it. And that's what made me start honoring my children, because the Bible tells them not to disrespect me. But then the Bible does tell me
not to provoke them to wrath.
Oh, okay. So it's a wheel in the middle of a wheel. You know what I'm saying? So these type of conversations we do have to have and be open and honest about it, because the healing can happen. We can bridge these gaps, because listen, my daughter, I'm giving her a play-by-play on her life now. It's like she's like, man, what do I do next? I'll be like, here, come over here and do this. Come over here and meet this person. Come over here and read this. Oh, join this. Oh, go over here and talk to it's like, it's a network.
That's how it's supposed to be.
And I'm letting people know who we are, because I ain't got no money. I said, but what I do have is a power. My power to speak, my vulnerability, my honesty, the truth, because that's what God told me to do. And I don't want to do this. I won't be telling my business. I don't. But the real life world examples, that's how we testify. That's how God can get you through it. And I'm going to tell you, I ain't going to tell you to just pray. I'm going to give you some access and some resources, because faith without works is dead. You got to do some work.
Have to. The reciprocal is also true. There's so many people out here who running around working that they never add the faith to it. I mean, and that's been my prayer for quite a long time at this point. I remember when I was younger, I thought that being busy is what I was called to be. But now I understand that being impactful is what I was called to be. I'm not called to be in every organization on the front line for every issue.
Come on now.
No, that's not it. God has called me to be impactful. So I focus. Okay, let's take it a day at a time. What are the tasks that I need to complete today? What are the organizations I need to reach out to today? What are the issues for this year or for the next couple of years that I need to focus on, right? And that's how I feel like that's how you start to progress,
And you share that knowledge. That's one of the things that I said, that what makes college so unaffordable is, they charge you for the knowledge. And I get that people have to be paid to, go into the profession, but the amount of money that they charge for tuition doesn't equate to what a teacher should be getting. Right.
And I would even argue that they're not charging us for the knowledge. They're charging us for the structure. A lot of the knowledge is free.
I don't disagree. Because now that I found the books that I've been reading in college, you know, and they've been online. And, I share it. I'll share those books and share what I've learned. Why? Because you shouldn't be paying for the structure. The structure is ridiculous for a degree. And then they really are telling these children that you'll be good if you make $18 an hour after you get out of college, because that's what one of them said. I said, girl, quit now. Get on up out of here. Save yourself some money. Because now minimum wage here in the city of Chicago is $15, but everything else has increased. So did you really gain?
And I mean, even if you look, I hate bringing up this point because it almost sounds like a anti-higher education point, but it's really a reality of the Black experience point. A Black person with an advanced degree is worth almost the same amount as I think a white person with some high school education. And let me check to make sure that that's correct. But if I'm for certain, I know that a Black person with a bachelor's degree is worth less than a white person that doesn't even have a high school diploma. So like we're talking, everybody likes to talk income gaps. And I'm like, okay, yes, there's an income gap. But part of the reason why life is so hard in and of itself is because of the wealth gap. It's like assets and liabilities. We have so many more liabilities than we do assets that even if we have income, a lot of that income is going to just covering the liabilities that we've inherited.
It's really a tragedy, when we think about it, and why I'm talking to my children a different way and I'm helping them in a different way, because let's just be honest, the conversations that I have with my children, I just tell them to simply testify to people, tell them all your business. And so when my daughter started doing it, she was like, Ma, say this, say this. I said, girl, speak the truth. Because one thing that we've noticed from her doing it, she's gotten a lot of help.
Yeah.
She's gotten a tremendous amount of help. I'm not even gonna lie and sugarcoat it. She's gotten, this girl get ready to start like about 4 or 5 businesses, and why I stay busy.
There we go.
Simply because I'm telling her to testify. Don't be scared to tell your story. Girl, throw me up under the bus. Tell folks how horrible I was to you as a child, right? Because it's the truth. And I come in and back it up. But then guess what else I back it up with? Psychology. I can explain my behavior.
That's it. And that's needed.
You know what I'm saying? It's as simple as that. And we talked ourselves up into doing a women's talk in March, for some people. Simply because they were listening, as they were listening to us speak, my daughter was allowed to speak her truth.
Yeah.
And then I was allowed to explain that truth, right? Not by denying it happened. I just explained my actions. And I explained it through psychology because it's a very powerful tool to use when you're talking to people.
Yeah. In a similar way that you explain it through psychology, I try to explain it through, data. So I found that data point for you. So U.S. median household net worth by race and education. White people with less than a high school diploma are worth about $83,000. Black people with a college degree are worth $70,000. They're worth $13,000 less having much more education. So, when I start to have these types of conversations, Black people with post-college, like with advanced degrees, $141,000 is what the median wealth is for them. White people with post-college, $455,000. That gap is just so large, so large, and it can help to explain, the culmination of hundreds of years of terrible policy. Slavery included, Black codes included, redlining included, vagrancy laws included. Talking about the wealth that has been siphoned away from Black people. The introduction of sales tax is racist. People don't understand the history of what a sales tax was. It was to move a tax away from property owners who were majority white to Black people who were majority, to people who are having to buy a lot to be able to sustain life, which were Black people because they didn't have land to grow. in addition to that, when you move that property, when you move that tax burden off of those property tax owners, you can make an excuse to say, hey, we don't have the tax revenue to be able to invest in education for these Black students who recently got freed. And that was the argument. That's how Mississippi phrased it. They're like, hey, okay, yeah, let's do a sales tax. We'll make it pretty cheap, where we still getting money from the Negro. But now we can make the excuse, hey, no more money for public education. It's not our fault though. Everything, when you start really looking at it and you understand race in the context of race in America, you start to see that almost every major political decision that's been made in the history of America has come down to like serious racial considerations. And unless if we bring those serious racial considerations back to the policy table now, we're never actually going to be able to fix any of the harms that were inflicted on our people.
And so what do you think about this? Because now I want to talk about solutions. Because this is, the focal point too, and Ask a Black Psychologist. We do want to talk about the issues. We do want to point out the experiences, but then we also want to provide some solutions. And so your group that you're a part of, and you can say the name again because it's a long.
The African American Leadership and Policy Institute, also known as the AALPI.
Man, we gotta, maybe we can find some type of pronunciation for it. Then that's how I remember it. But the solution that I came up with was, the bartering and the trading, right? But then here's the other component. Those with those PhDs and those advanced degrees start teaching children. It's like you create a mentorship program and then you train them in what you know how to do. And then you hire them, and you build your own empire to compete with others. I said, because this is how we can bridge that wealth gap, by pulling our people out. Now, some may argue and say this is segregation. No, I call it know your worth. Because just like you said, right, those people with those advanced degrees aren't getting paid the same amount of money as people with white people with a bachelor's degree or a high school diploma. So how, because I'm teaching my daughter psychology, and I'll teach it to anybody else who wants to learn how to use your story to talk to people, especially Black people. Why? Because you can explain your trauma.
Right.
You can explain.
But I feel like one potential caveat in that idea is, it kind of goes back to the wealth, right? How much do we have to be able to invest in organizations and institutions that can go to bat for us? Because I know my organization, I'm not gonna lie, we're way, way, way underfunded. I'm way underpaid. Like if I look at the value of people at comparable organizations and what they're receiving, they're making almost $120,000 more than what I'm making. And when you look at the reality of, okay, where exactly can we get funding? Either I have to go to white ran philanthropic organizations to get my funding, or I have to go and try to scrape together money from my community to be able to even get a staff. I'm staffing one right now, trying to do this, with me and a working board, right? A board that, they have their own jobs. Some of them are retired and they contribute where they can, but also that's not a sustainable model if we're trying to build an institution. You look at the Latino Policy Forum, they got money. Like they were able to hire a staff that can actually help them to fulfill, the policy agendas that, are actually going to help the community. But when we don't have the resources available to us, what ends up happening is you have to lean on a few. They get overworked. They feel underappreciated. They're underpaid. They can't really handle the business that they have to handle just to survive. And you kill them up, 2-3 years, and you have to go find another one. Instead of actually having a groundswell where we have, some type of resource base where we can say, okay, my plan was to bring, come into this organization and try to set up an infrastructure where we can hire, we can do exactly what you talked about, mentoring and training young people to be policy practitioners, and then employing them as well. Here, we're going to teach you how to advocate. We're going to teach you how to, do what is the legislative process, right? How can you advocate for these potential policies that we're going to try to put in place, and then pay you to do that exact work. But the thing is, without those resources, we can train you. Unfortunately, we won't be able to pay you. So it has to be a little bit more thought that goes into, how exactly we can mobilize the little Black wealth we do have into vehicles that can actually help us to grow and perpetuate, sustain, and pass down even more wealth, right? And that's kind of why I'm here.
And I got a solution too for that, right?
There we
Because,
go.
I always got to think ahead. And so when we think about, what we can do as political forces, we have to understand the history. The church was the focal point to bring all of this together, and they brought all of their time, their talent, and their treasures. So when you're looking at a large movement like this, the Black community is very powerful, and we got a lot of money, right? Because when we look who's spending all of this money, it really is Black people that's keeping, this country afloat still, right?
We also spend a lot on credit. Now,
So,
that's one thing that's one caveat that I would throw in there, that it's not necessarily liquid that we spending, but we do have spending power.
So, right, let's reverse that and have some different type of conversations, because listen, it doesn't have to just be me. The one thing about psychology and what I've learned is that it isn't about experiments. And so, you can have pockets of experiments of how things can get funded.
Right.
And so how we look at this, becomes very different, because you can't tell me you're not willing to invest in your children.
Yeah.
Because the children are our future. And so if we begin to take these skills and teach children for free, it's like it's the training, right? And then as they get interested and uninterested, they're able to move until they find something that they want to stick with, right? And so it's that fluid of that motion, but then also holding the parents accountable, because that's one of the things that I said I was going to do, and I haven't got started yet, because I had a death in the family and I'm still processing, what happened. But teaching baking for free, it's a tangible skill that you can make money from, and then you take that money that you make and you reinvest it, right? So I just know the baking part, right? And I know you can make some money from it because, I've sold cakes.
Right.
But what if we get somebody that understands the finances behind the baking, and you pair that person with this new young baker?
Yeah.
And this is how we can, we can take Hostess down, because now we got our children know how to bake. We can take, Intimates down, You know what I'm saying? So we got to look at it that way. Just doing the whole, and I told parents, I say, listen, I'll teach your child for free, but here's what I need. Get the supplies. I'm gonna need a platform. You got to keep a roof over my head, my lights and gas on, and I need the internet. And I travel, so it's like I will be able to move around more freely with these things. So fine, if you can't keep my lights and gas on, is yours on? I come teach from your house. You know what I'm saying? Just being flexible like that, just to say, this is what I need to do this work. So this how everybody is held accountable about what they say they want their children to learn, because honestly, we should be working for our children. If you have a child, your job then now as a parent is to work for your child.
Yeah. And I think that, part of the reason why, there's a difference in ideology, right? Where in our community, I feel like we individualize what we're going to do for our children. Whereas in other communities, they institutionalize what they're going to do for their children. They make sure that there are institutions in place, procedures and policies in place that take care of, being able to make sure that your child can grow old in a healthy manner, in a safe manner, and be able to make a living for themselves. Whereas for us, I feel like, we haven't created those institutions, those procedures and those policies to kind of facilitate or help facilitate that process as much. But I agree with exactly what you're saying. We definitely do need to come together, hold each other more accountable to create those types of institutions and those policies and those procedures. because that's the only way we'll survive.
And why I just shared it, right?
Mhm.
And now, anybody who's interested can see this,
Mhm.
because I'm into sharing resources. It's not for me to say, oh no, this is just for me, this is my idea. I want to see everybody do it. You know what I'm saying? Because it's going to be infectious once, it catches on to this idea of we can do this.
Right.
We can do this.
Yeah.
We can do this. It's not that hard. It really is fulfilling a need, and why prayer should be, some people want to, pray in private, but, I believe in praying in public now. Say what you need. What did you ask God for? Unasked question is an unanswered answer, right? An unanswered question. You have to ask. The Bible says knock and, the door will be open. Well, in order for you to knock, you got to physically do an action.
Mhm.
So it's the physicality of the spirituality of what we have to do as Black people, like really put that into practice.
Yeah.
Because that was what I did while I was in college. I
Mhm.
really took my spirituality and I put it into action. And when
Yeah.
I asked those questions, right, sometimes God had to answer me because the teacher didn't have an answer. Because
Ooh-wee.
I'm in my 40s. I've lived through some things. And so
Mhm.
you just can't push academics on me, because I'm bringing my experiences with me and I'm going to challenge you,
That's it.
because my experiences tell this whole story.
Yeah. And that's
Not just,
that's a key point. That's a key point about critical thinking. There are so many people who call themselves critical thinkers, but if you can't confront the biases that you hold near and dear, and everybody has them, are you really as much of a critical thinker as you think you are? And the answer is no, you're not. You actually are just regurgitating a lot of information that you heard. And I, in regards to the whole academic, entire academic space, the ivory towers, as I like to call them. I've pushed so many professors. Hey, we hear these very white centric, whitewash narratives that very rarely bring into account Black perspectives. And when you start to talk Black, you get targeted. People get real uncomfortable answering Black specific questions in academic spaces. Why can't we talk about all people of color? Because I'm not talking about all people of color. I'm not all people of color. My experience here in this country has been unique to the Black American experience. It's not the same as the Latinx experience. It's not the same as the Asian American experience. It's not. I hate to say it. I mean, but
not, it's
I can
true.
still be an ally to those
Ally,
people and still
exactly.
believe in their humanity while
Exactly.
advocating for my people. And that was one thing that got me in undergrad. I advocated for everybody in undergrad. I was, hey, but a light bulb kind of switched as I got closer to graduation. I'm like, and all this advocating that I'm did for everybody, I'm about to watch less than 25, 30 Black men actually cross the stage. Black American men, probably less than 20 out of the thousands of people that are getting ready to graduate. Who am I to advocate for all people when I don't even have my own house in order? My own people are failing and I'm advocating for everybody. I need to be a stronger advocate for my people. There are people who need to be empowered to use their own voice. And, because I was an advocate and I was used to grassroots advocacy, grass tops advocacy, I knew about the legislative process. I have a little bit of an idea of political strategy. I'm like, listen, I have so much that I can teach to people who they're not voiceless. They just need to be shown the ways in which their voice is impactful and powerful.
Yes, exactly. And why I say, I can't speak for everybody, right? I'll speak for someone who looks like me, who identifies like I do, right? That's who, and then even in that, I'll say I still can't speak for everybody. I can just speak for Yvonne. But listen, anybody who can identify as I speak and what I've gone through, then okay, yeah, come on, you my tribe.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so that's how I can look at this and then not say that, I'm alienating anyone. I'm looking at it very specifically. Why? Because I identify as a Black woman, and Black women in this country have really had it bad.
Oh, yeah.
you know. And so when we don't understand the history, then of course our future will look bad.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm trying to connect our Black women back to the history, because we were very powerful force.
Yeah.
We started educating our children after enslavement was, you know, over on paper. Uh, you know, we built the schools, we
Mhm.
built the classrooms, we cooked the food, we took care of the community, we delivered the babies. You know, we watched, we cried, we those were the things that we did together. And
Mhm.
so as we get back to that, because I'm going to teach it to my last breath, because God told me to go back. Go back where, Yvonne? I said, go back where? To the basics,
That's it.
taking care of the community, looking out for one another, speaking to your neighbor,
Yeah.
showing love, asking if they need some help. Even if they don't accept it, you be willing to be there for them.
Mhm.
And that's the nature of my work. Yeah, I'm getting ready to start a job and it's only part time. She said, Yvonne, is that okay? I said, girl, yeah, because what you're going to teach me, I'm bringing it back to the community because I'm going to build that way.
Yeah. Same. I literally just accepted a job offer at the University of Chicago, the Inclusive Economy Lab. And, you know, primarily because, you know, the position that I currently hold is just not cutting it right now, but also I still want to be involved. So I was like, okay, let's go find something that still allows me to like deal with policy in a really tangible way, where I can advocate for Black people. And then I can still take that, what they're talking about at that job, and I can bring it to my organization. We can critique it. It's the right way to think about these things, right? So I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you.
So this is going to be one of many conversations with Senator Marvin Slaughter. Um, we like to, ain't no we, it's just me. I'm running my own stuff too.
That's it.
But no, I know. In all seriousness, I work with my daughter, and her name is Amanda Armour, and she got some hashtags. Hey Amanda, and Sweet Energy Baking Business. She's getting ready to work over here with foster children. She's going to teach them writing, video. So I told her to also to work for children for free, and she has agreed. So that's what I'm saying. This is a network that we're building, and we're looking for like-minded individuals who say they'll teach children for free. But here's what we need, and say what we need, and stand on what we need, and work with people who are willing to give us what we need. I mean, that's just it. So as we begin to do more of this work, and I'm partnering with you, because your name be in my mouth too when I'm talking to people and they need something.
Likewise.
And I know that this is what Senator Marvin will do, so I'm like, I'm like, no, here, I'm gonna pass this over to him because I don't have to do everything. That's one way to avoid burnout. Stay in your lane. Don't try and do everything. Resource out, because this is how we're going to build our network of people and individuals that want to do the same work we're doing. And so I appreciate you coming and talking with me today. And like I said, this won't be our last conversation, because from this, hopefully we'll have more people who want to have and join in and say, well, hey, this is what I'm going to offer our community, because your organization, say it for me again.
The African American Leadership and Policy Institute, also known as the AALPI.
They're going to need more people, more support from our community. And we need all hands on deck. I'm Gen X, he's Gen Z, and I was able to meet him, not as a parent, but as a student, as a peer. I learned from him and he learned from me. The Bible calls this the wheel in the middle of a wheel. And that's what we're coming to do. It's all about strategy now and how we can, move forward and stop being stuck. I offer my services for free. I can't diagnose anybody, but I can definitely have a psychology conversation with you and bring that Black studies, that political science, and this spirituality, because God told me to do it. And And so this is where we are for our community. Again, Marvin, thank you so much. And I call you Marvin now as a friend, but I understand that I'm gonna have to drop that senator in front of it when you enter your position.
I'm gonna always be Marvin to the community.
Hey,
Y'all gotta address me as no senator. That's
I love it.
that's not for friends. That's not for friends and family.
All
That's for
right.
people I know professionally.
Okay, cool. So anything else you wanna leave with us before we close this out?
You know, the African American Leadership and Policy Institute is, you know, always looking for people who are, you know, ready to get involved in our 5 core policy areas: family strengthening, health and wellness, workforce and economic development, education, and criminal justice. We're building out our working groups. If you're interested, you can email me at info@theaalpi.org. You know, I'm quick to respond and we can try to figure out what your fit would be. Looking forward to anybody who's, you know, willing to reach out.
Yes, and then we'll also I'll get the link and then I'll add it to this video because I'm getting ready to post this one right now. This one was good. I love it. All right, Marvin Slaughter. We'll see you next time.
Okay, sounds good.